Well, hello, everyone. We're live. We're live with love, compassion, and hope. Woo, woo.
Woo, woo.
Hey, everyone.
Oh my gosh. Oh, we've got to give Guard a bit for bringing us together. Guard, we love you. Guard Jameson.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Totally. So we're here to talk about some hope,
some compassion,
some love, some love. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks for joining the party, everybody.
And how we do that.
This is our first time coming together to talk, and we haven't planned anything. I'm representing compassion today.
My name's Scarlett Lewis.
And I'm Hope. I'm the Hope lady.
So Kathryn is representing hope, Scarlett's representing love, and I'm representing compassion. And we feel as though at this juncture in our history, in the world's current situation, I think we need to discuss these attributes of life and how we can implement them to make this world a better place. Obviously, as everyone in the world knows, compassion is the most important thing that we need right now and should always come first on any agenda of bringing this world to a higher stage of awareness and spirituality. Without compassion, nothing else really has the opportunity to be lived and acted. Everything else is just a theoretical idea. But with compassion, it's real, it's living, it's underground. And I'm very, very happy to represent compassion today. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay, well, Pato, that does not sound very spiritual. See. Not the most spiritually enlightened. Passion is better than hope, especially when hope is, hope's the belief the future can be better than today. And if we don't believe in a better future and that we have the power to make it so, if we don't believe that, what does compassion and love even matter? Right? Scarlett?
Well, you guys, I mean, I think everybody agrees that love is the most important component. We are born in love, with love. Sorry, Pato, it's not something that you have to generate and practice. Kathryn, it's not a hope or a belief for a better future. It's actually right now within us. And whereas hope is so important, as is compassion, I think love is really kind of, if it were a company, it would be the CEO. Love is what starts and ends the entire conversation.
All right.
No, I mean, they did Gallup did the study, and hope was the #1 need of followers, far beyond anything. Trust was
study?
#2.
What study was that?
Gallup.
Interesting.
That was Gallup's.
Yeah, I checked that out, and they said it wasn't working very well.
Yeah, I think there was a glitch.
Yeah, there was a glitch. But what I wanted to say, everyone who is here today, I'm sure you will all agree that our world is in a state of emergency. And we need all the tools in our toolbox to make a change and to bring a change, firstly, in our own lives. Because most people that I know have suffered from some form of trauma. And without some form of love, compassion, and hope, people just lose it. They lose the desire to live. They lose the desire to socialize. They just don't want to be involved in life in this crazy world anymore. So we really have to start with ourselves then the people around us, and then the world at large. So fun and jokes aside, I just want to say that I'm very honored to be here with two representatives of love and hope who have been doing this for a long time, who are actually active around the world doing compassionate work. And I'm just very honored to be here to start this discussion for the first time and to hopefully engage people in thinking about these tools in their toolbox and how they will use them to make their own world a more beautiful place.
That's beautiful, Pato, and I totally agree. And that's why we're here today. We're going to be talking about these individual elements that actually work together for your safety, health, and well-being, regardless of age or stage. These are really, all three of them, the most important elements that you can focus on. And today we're going to give you ways to practice them and things to think about. We might say things that you've never heard of before, but really, really important. And please share this when you can, because this is a really important message and it's needed today with all the fear in the world, all that's going on. We really need to help each other and ourselves stabilize and with resilience and of course, love is a big part of that, but so is hope and compassion.
Yeah, absolutely. And you may think of these as soft skills. They talk about them as soft skills, and I would argue that they are the most important skills for us to learn how to cultivate and use and grow. And we think of love, hope, and compassion in the abstract. And my focus in my field has been understanding hope at a very deep level. What is hopelessness, and how do we get to hope when you have challenges? And the cool thing about it is you can actually measure. You can measure love. You can measure hope. You can measure compassion. And to me, we need to be teaching these like we teach math. How do we become more compassionate as humans? How do we practice skills that cultivate love in our lives and loving relationships with self and others? And hope. How do we create a better world? Something that's better than today. How do I do it for myself, and how do we do it collectively? It's so important that we start to talk about these things because they're really critical skills for our time.
What is the opposite to compassion?
What is the opposite? Hatred? I don't know. Disdain?
Indifference, maybe?
Yeah, because I know like hopelessness is the opposite to hope. Hate is usually recognized as the opposite to love.
Mm-hmm.
Hate or fear.
Or fear, yes.
Yeah.
The opposite to compassion, for caring for somebody else, would be indifference. Yeah.
Yeah. Disdain.
Yeah.
Active disrespect.
And I will tell you that I have an incredible story that is it's the culmination of what the opposite of all of these three character values are. And that is, my 6-year-old son's murder in his first grade classroom alongside 19 of his classmates and 6 educators. And that is and was from, and we continue to see this, and not to mention, wars from.
Sorry, Scarlett. Sorry to stop you, Scarlett. I have to stop. Could you please let the viewers know where you're talking about? What is it you're actually talking about?
I'm talking about the Sandy Hook school tragedy in 2012. Thanks, Pato. And so since then, for the past 13 years.
Your son was one of the kids that lost it. Thank you.
My son, thank you, Jesse Lewis, lost his life there. And, the reason that I am an advocate for love is that I came home that day and found a message on our chalkboard that he had written sometime shortly before. And it said, nurturing, healing, love, in first grade handwriting. But I realized that was the solution, and it's love, hope, and compassion because they all work together. But that really is the solution. And as Kathryn was saying, these are skills that we can learn, practice, reinforce within our lives, and they lead us down a path towards well-being, towards thriving, towards flourishing. And the opposite is what happened to my 6-year-old son, a former student who was neglected, who was treated, Pato, with indifference, who did not experience nurturing, healing love. And Kathryn, what research says on hope was hopeless. And I learned from you that hopelessness is the single most consistent factor in suicide and violence. And the amazing thing is, you've done incredible work and have an entire framework of how to cultivate hope within ourselves. I don't think, and I'm not sure how many people that are listening view compassion, hope, and love as actual skills and tools in your toolbox that you can use to become the best version of yourself, which is what we're doing on this playground called Earth. We're here to do that. And so we're here today to give you a few of those skills that you can take away and use right away.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's so important that it's not easy. Like, it's not, we're doing this work, all three of us, all over the world, and there are so many places where it's not easy, where love and hope and compassion can feel so far away. And it's really in learning to break it down into those micro steps, so that we are going in that direction of love, hope, and compassion consciously, because it's so important. We've used our programs in war zones and with kids that are dealing with bombings. And, we think, well, you don't practice the skills why would you practice them? But that's actually that's the time when you need to practice these skills. All the time you do, but in crisis, it's like really important that we learn how to continually cultivate our love, hope, and compassion. It's really important. And, Pato, you have an incredible story about how you moved to compassion and how, you were bigger than what you grew up in and learned how to transmute that energy into creating a global movement in song and teaching through music, which is such a fun way to learn, and
Yes.
understanding Ubuntu and teaching all of us. So, that it's just critical that we get these skills out.
So Kathryn, how did you get to this position of being an ambassador of hope? What pushed you to this point?
Yeah, well, it was, I lost my dad when I was 18. He died by suicide, and I was super close to him. So, I saw firsthand when you see someone else struggle, and you can't help them, or you can't fix, and so that was really, really hard for me. And then I had my own suicide attempt. I wasn't in a major depressive disorder. There was not it was a moment in time. So I had my own attempt, and then I worked for companies and businesses, and I wanted to support the mental health space and give back to something that had taken so much from me. And, what they were teaching me, the doctors would tell me I'm at a high risk of suicide. And what they would teach me was, here's 800 numbers, you need to lock up your medications. And I thought, well, that's like so far a time of crisis. And if you want to prevent something, you really have to understand root cause. And what I came to learn is hopelessness is the single, as Scarlett mentioned, consistent predictor of suicide. It also predicts violence, addiction, self-harm. And when I looked at what hopelessness was, I thought, well, everyone experiences moments of hopelessness. When you look at it, it's emotional despair. So, who doesn't feel sad, angry, afraid? And it's a sense of helplessness. So when those two things combine, that's really a moment of hopelessness. And we're all experiencing those. We're just unconsciously dealing with them. And so it's about making that all conscious. And then really, how do we get from out of our despair to feeling better and out of our helplessness and into action, and ensuring everyone around the world knows how to do that.
Mm-hmm. And one of the toughest things, because I have actually been through mental issues in my past, you know, I had a breakdown before. And what I felt was that suffer from any illness, from any ailment, and people will be compassionate for you.
Yeah.
But when it comes to mental illness and depression, because they cannot see it, it's not a scar, it's not a broken leg, it hasn't got plaster around it, because
Right.
they can't see what's going on. There's more this attitude of fear or misunderstanding where they almost frown on you rather than feeling compassionate for what you're going through, you know?
Absolutely. And
It's really challenging.
absolutely. And it gets back to fear too. We often fear what we don't understand. So instead of being curious and trying to understand it, we just, you know, and that's not helpful at all, you know. And mental health conditions are very treatable. And I believe also many of them are preventable, but we have to create a community where it's acceptable to time and actually encouraged. We're encouraged to talk about our sadness. We're encouraged to talk about our anger. You know, we don't have to act out on our anger, but we're encouraged to express it in healthy ways, as well as fears. You know, when we're not able to discuss our fears, they can turn into anxiety disorders or panic attacks. And it's because our fear just keeps building up. That stress response gets worse and worse. Instead of like being curious and exploring them and sitting in those uncomfortable feelings and coming to understand them together as a community.
Oh, sorry, Pato.
Scarlett, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm listening to you, Kathryn, and I'm thinking that takes courage. That takes courage. It takes a lot of courage. That's why in the Choose Love movement, we teach a formula that starts with courage. And courage is like a muscle. We can use it and practice it and strengthen it. You need courage to have those conversations. You need courage to sit with the discomfort. You need courage to be with somebody who is not feeling good or acting well. And so, you know, that's where it starts.
Yeah. And Pato, when you think about, let's talk about compassion. I mean, when you think about when you were dealing with challenges, how would you have liked people to respond to you? What would you have liked? What would be a compassionate way to connect with you as you're dealing?
What I was going to say, as you were speaking just before Scarlett, was I had a revelation while you were speaking. And the revelation was that the reason why people respond to mental illness the way they do is because of the unpredictable nature of human behavior when your mind is not functioning right. It's that unpredictability that they are afraid of, because when you're mentally impaired, even though when I was going through my breakdown, I was like gentle, kind, loving, you know, but I have seen people who get angry and violent when they go through their stressful periods or their breakdowns. People behave in different ways. But in answer to your question, I would have liked people to just try to be a bit more patient with me and a bit more understanding, because I don't have a history of being mean or violent, and my demeanor was not aggressive, you know, even though I wasn't fully myself when I look back. But when you're going through it, you think you're normal. You think everybody else is out of sync, you know, and that you're the one that's got it all together. So, but I think patience and understanding, and I've seen sometimes when the police encounter people with depression or mental issues, they don't have a full understanding of how to interact with these kind of people. Sometimes these people get shot, killed, imprisoned, and or roughed up really unfairly because they're not following the directions that they're being given. And sometimes some of these people don't even have the ability to verbally communicate that, what they're going through. So it's a really tough dilemma in society on how to deal with people with mental issues. And there's a lot of people in prison suffering from mental issues when they should be in a hospital caring for them. So they get a double abuse from getting put into incarceration and then being abused by the other people who are incarcerated that don't understand what's this mad guy doing in the jail, So it's very, very hard. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah. And that's, a lot of that is a more severe psychiatric illness. And unfortunately, the drugs now really are messing with brain structures, and what they're putting in drugs now can really cause damage to brains, which makes it really hard. I think it's good. Our police are starting to get taught de-escalation techniques, and, in Reno, Nevada, shout out to our Mayor Hillary Sheevy. We have separate, when I was in Reno, but where we started Hopeful Cities, they had a special teams that would go out to support in the de-escalation and in that how to communicate to people, especially if they're having some kind of psychotic break. And it's important, and that's, compassion and love all come into play in that, and understanding. But the majority of mental health disorders are, not extreme. Anxiety and depression make up probably over 80%. And they're very treatable, and I think also preventable if we created a culture where we accepted fear and we accepted sadness and we accepted anger as signs that we need to look at something. I would, I'd get so sad and then I'd ruminate my way into a depressive episode. Yes. And much of that could have been prevented had I been taught skills and been encouraged. You're sad, that makes sense. Like, do some healthy things to navigate your sadness, as opposed to, a quick fix through, drinking or smoking or all kind of the unhealthy ways that I tried to cope with my own sadness.
Can I share something quickly?
Of course.
And I want to hear from Scarlett, but I haven't told many people this, but I had my episode when I was in Israel, and I went to visit this religious community. I'm not going to say their name, but they tried to force me to become a convert. And when I managed to get away from there, and on my flight, getting on the plane to fly back home, I had an episode, a mental breakdown on the plane. And the airport security came and took me off the plane. And the only thing I was doing was complaining about when you open the air on the plane, and it's like condensation, and it's like steam blowing down because the airplane was so hot. I had this condensation blowing down, and I said to the air stewardess, I didn't want this condensation blowing on me. And so they called the security. The security took me off the plane and chained my hands and my feet. Oof. And threw me into the airport prison. And the next morning they chained me up and dragged me, injected me, threw me into the back of a wagon and took me to an Israeli prison. And then I was missing. My family, nobody knew where I was. And I had 2 weeks, 14 days before I had a major tour of America. And they kept me in this prison for 10 days. Oh. And every morning I would get up and say, excuse me, my name is Pato Banton. I've got a tour in 2 weeks and I need to get home to my family and my band so I can prepare. And every day they would chase me down the corridor catch me and inject me with a big syringe. I don't know what was in it, but every day they would stab me with the needle, push all this liquid into me. And then after day 5, they chained me to a bed, a metal bed with no mattress. And they kept me on that metal bed chained up for about 6 days.
Oh my God.
About 5 or 6 days.
Pato, I'm so sorry.
An ambassador, my family contacted an ambassador from the UK embassy to come to find me. And then my brother and a nurse, my ex-girlfriend who was a nurse, flew to Israel to take me back home from the prison. And when I left the prison, I couldn't walk. I had to learn how to walk again. And my whole body was stiff. I couldn't move my arms, I couldn't move my body. I was just stiff, really, really stiff. And I remember trying to learn to take baby steps to walk again. And I only had 4 days when I got home to prepare for my next tour. And I still did the tour. Everybody begged me, don't do the tour, don't do the tour. But I just felt as though I needed to do the tour to heal.
Wow.
And I did the tour. The first 3 dates, I could just about move on the stage. But after about a week, I was jumping around the stage again and back to my normal self. But that's what I went through, you know, from a very simple situation. And another thing, while I was there, I'm going to make this short. I saw guys come in there from the same place I had got out of, 2 guys. They only got 1 injection. And after the first injection, they were sitting down on the floor, banging their heads on the wall. Just like a zombie, just banging their heads into the wall. But I managed to get up every single day and complain about wanting to go back home, because that's where my focus was.
Wow. I'm going to tell you what, Pato, that is, I mean, your story right there was when I got involved in the global mental health work over 20 years ago. I said I want to do it from an international standpoint. And I went to Greece with my first presentation to a group of people in the global mental health space. And I was there with the BBC. They were live streaming a lot of this events. It was Vikram Patel's global mental health movement. And they talked about the human rights abuses that are happening globally in people. I mean, this is a normal practice throughout Africa and, you know,
yes.
South America. They chain people to trees. They starve the demons out of them. They think
you're possessed.
They're possessed. It's horrific. And I knew as soon as I heard those stories that I had to engage globally. I had to do everything in my power to bring awareness to what's happening and what happens in the brain when we have these psychotic breaks and whatnot. I mean, the bodies, we can only handle so much stress and so much chaos and so much. And love, hope, and compassion are all key for healing. And so, you know, stopping those abuses I certainly hope that they're not doing that in Israel anymore. I know that the world has come a long way in what's the practices related to global mental health. But I think what you talk about is important. People are in fear. They don't know what to do. So they think chaining is the only solution or injecting you with something. And it's tragic. It's really tragic what's happening. And yeah, my heart goes out to you for that, your experience of that, which is again, why I'm so passionate about, I want to ensure everyone knows what hopelessness is and how we get to hope, how we practice these skills, how we cultivate it. We all need to learn everywhere, you know, as well as being loving and compassionate.
Scarlett?
I'm just saying that I'm amazed at your strength and endurance in that. And it must have been, I believe, because of the message that you carry and the work that you do, the people that you touch, the music that you share, the message in all of that is that, you know, we are one, and filled with compassion. Obviously, I think that that was the reason that you were able to get up every single day. That is incredible. I remember that Viktor Frankl, the author of
A Man's Search for Meaning.
Thank you. A Man's Search for Meaning. I talk about it every day. Says when and talking about his experience in a concentration camp. I was thinking about that for you, Pato, because he said if a man knows his why, he can withstand anyhow. And that is, I mean, what an experience. You had no idea why or what was happening, but you did have the purpose, and that was
That's right.
family and your music. And that's kind of one of the lessons that we're talking about here in Hope and Compassion and Love is focus. You had a focus on goodness and what you wanted and something to live for. And in that way, you saw the difference between you and the other people that got one shot and one day and were banging their heads, and you were able to endure just a lot. And I think that also that's part of the message that we're bringing here today too, is that hope, love, and compassion can literally get us through anything that life throws at us, and that we do not have to be incapacitated by fear, that we can incorporate these tools that are already within us, but just learn to consciously access them and use them in our own lives. So absolutely amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I never heard you share that story before. That was incredible.
Mm-hmm. I think I read something. I read a book sometimes called the Urantia book, and it says in the Urantia book, and I've never applied it to this situation, but now thinking about what you just said, there's a part of it that says, if you are focused on yourself, you get very little work done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know? And I realized that when you have a purpose, and your purpose is service, to do things for other people.
Yeah.
I had a purpose. I had my children, and I had my audience, my fans, my music family that I call them, that I've always been on a mission. It's not my career has never been about money. It's always been about honoring the music that set me free, that educated and inspired me, which is reggae music. And so I've been on a mission as a reggae artist to also inspire other people and to educate other people about the spiritual treasures that I find in my search. And that's what was motivating me. I never, not even today, not even right now, or when it was happening, I never once hated the people that were treating me like that. I never once gave them a second thought as though these was my enemies. I always just considered that they were doing their job, but I had my job to do. And their job was stopping me from having the freedom to go and do my job. But I never once hated them. I never cursed them. I never even frowned at them. I just realized that this was the dynamic, and I need to get away so I can continue what I'm doing. And when I got home, my only focus was I've got 4 days to get back on the road. And I never thought that what I was doing could have been harmful to my own well-being, but it gave me something to work towards. It gave me a target that I had to heal myself and be able to walk and be able to sing again within that 4 days period, you know?
You know what, Pato, that reminds me of a story that I heard within the last few days about Gandhi, who was also beaten by his captors. And when he got out of prison, he said he never held disdain for them because they thought they were doing the right thing.
Right thing.
And, you know, when I think about that, I think about how hatred veils and incapacitates us really as human beings. It isolates us. And I'm thinking about how, even in your experience, Pato, with you not responding with hatred and revenge to those captors, and which of course could escalate, and as well as escalate your own pain. But you had your focus, and and I think that's what we're talking about here today, a focus on what is good rather than what is bad. And there's so much bad out there that we could focus on, and that gets our attention because our brain's number one job is to keep us safe. But in actuality, there is so much more good, right? Bad in the world, and we have to actually every once in a while, use a lot of tools to turn towards what is good, right?
Yeah.
It's like I'm watching the news. I'm watching the news since I've been back home, and it's like if you just focus on the media, you just think that everything's bad in the world.
Yeah.
But
right.
But then you don't realize that what they're actually doing, they're repeating the same bad news over and over again. Whereas when it comes to good news, I could give you 24 hours of good news without repeating myself once.
That's right.
Yeah, and how amazing that you just went back to your mission and to what you were doing. You think about, we get so distracted by like punishing and like holding people, and it takes us away from what we're here to do, like mission and purpose. And you just going back there, and it's not to say we don't do that, and yet it's so important that my belief is that I'm not responsible for holding every single person accountable, that God works that out for me, or the divine, or whomever, I don't have to then go back and, I can work on laws and rules, but stay in my lane of my purpose and why I'm here and what I'm supposed to be doing. And to me, it's so clear why you're the compassion guy now, you practice by what you do. And that's how we are leaders. We don't, Scarlett doesn't just talk about love. Scarlett is love. Scarlett shows us how to love when you go through the worst thing imaginable. How many people are just focused on that revenge, on that? But it's learning, how do we take the heart and how do we move ourselves through it in a way that doesn't destroy self and doesn't destroy others? Like, hold people accountable, and yet really focus on, go for it, Pato.
Scarlett, going back to Gandhi, he was assassinated, right?
I believe so.
Do you remember what he said? Because I think he got stabbed. Isn't that how he died?
Who remembers?
Let's look it up really quickly. We should know this.
I think he said something to the person who killed him before he died. If you could find Gandhi's last words.
Let's see who's faster, Scarlett.
Okay, he's this says that his final words were, "Oh God," after being shot.
Okay.
February 30th, 1948. He, according to witnesses, he raised his hands in a Hindu greeting gesture, namaste, before collapsing.
Yep. He actually said that to the guy who shot him, I believe.
Oh, so namaste.
Yes. Namaste.
Which means the light in me sees the light in you.
Yes.
Gosh.
And the same thing when Jesus was on the cross, his last words were, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do."
That's right. That's exactly right.
And the thing is, you can't fake that. You can't pretend. When you are, it doesn't matter how spiritual you think you are. You can practice spirituality at home or in your circle of spiritual friends, but you don't know how spiritual you are until you are tested. And when somebody is tested and their natural reaction is love, compassion, or hope, that shows that that person is true to what they are saying. They're living, they're walking the walk, they're talking the talk, they're living that life naturally. It doesn't have to be rehearsed. It's just natural.
It's innate, and their brains are wired to it. And it's also spiritual, soulful.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing. It's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's also like tested with money when people are given money. Like you see how, you know, are they still aligned with what they talk about with what they see, or does that corrupt them? Or
money changes people. Yes.
Yeah, it has the capacity to. So it's
And in smaller ways, every single day, are you authentic to your beliefs? Because things come up, and you could do one thing or you could do another. You could do the right thing or not. And sometimes it seems like it's more effort to do the right thing. But in reality, that alignment is what drives hope, compassion, and love.
Mm-hmm.
It then ripples out to other people. It's incredible.
Yeah, it does. It's so powerful. I mean, I'm, you know, with my practices on hope, like every day I'm working on my hope, like on my hope skills. And obviously I'm very focused on hope specifically, and which is why I love being with my compassion and love. I hear these stories and I'm just like, oh my gosh, these are like, it's, you see why they're all so important, you know, they're all so important. We argue about which is more important for fun and you know, to have fun with it, to not take it so seriously, because we're all, you know, well, Pato, you have way more fun, I think, than I do about my hope. I'm very and no, but it's it's, I mean, I have fun with my hope too, especially with the kids. I love working with the kids. Hope, so fun and inspiring. But yeah, they're all important. They're all equally important. And I learned so much. Life is so much better with love, compassion, and hope. And when we're intentional about it, when we practice it, and when we share it with others, and when we work on it collectively and individually.
And the thing is, can you really separate the three? Because, you know, even though hope is your focus, you have to have love for the people that you're trying to help.
Totally.
And to have compassion.
Yes.
When you recognize what has caused them to get to that place where they are feeling hopeless.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's part of how we teach, you know, in the framework itself too. It's just not like focusing on compassion, like looking at things through the eyes of compassion. It's like we do this exercise in our programming where we look at yesterday. We write about our day yesterday for a few minutes. And then we again write about our day yesterday through the lens of gratitude. Dan Tomasulo, who wrote a book, Learn Hopefulness, talks about this. And what a different day it is when you look at what you write, for what you just focus on and write about versus through the lens of gratitude. And I think the same is with compassion and love. Like if we live our lives through the lens of compassion, what does that really look like on a day-to-day basis in what we do? And so to me, like focusing on it, like, you know, I'm so focused on it, but really focusing on that and how can it show up everywhere in every interaction I have with everyone I meet, with everything I'm doing. Like, am I bringing that compassion and love? You know, is it loving? Is it in a loving way? It's just, it's a really important reminder for me to, you know, focus on those equally.
Yeah. And I think it's a good reminder that it's a conscious effort every day, always available, and a good question to ask is with everything, is my reaction coming from love or is it coming from fear? Because you cannot be in both places at once. So if it's from fear, then you think about you think about compassion and you try to move yourself back to love, because what we focus on grows, and you're getting hit from all sides, fearful and hateful, literally, messages, especially with the cowardice that this screen provides. You can sit down in your living room and no one actually sees you. You say things that you would never say to someone's face, and then there's the ripple effect of that. And there's a ripple effect too of your choices every day. And if they're good, they ripple out that way. If they're not so good, if you're not so happy in your life right now, if that's why you're watching this and you're trying to get some takeaways, think about what you're putting out there, and shift the focus of your lens and use gratitude. It gives you a 10% mood boost, and it helps you move beyond those distressing thoughts that we all have. It just takes effort to pay attention to the good stuff, and attention is the purest form of love. So really, remembering that and shifting your focus, maybe put a little alarm on your phone. I don't know, be creative in ways that you remind yourself, because you will forget.
Yeah. I think one of the best pieces of advice something I read is just, when you don't feel loved, like if I was in a time where I didn't feel loved, or I didn't feel like someone was being kind to me, or, or I felt love was missing, I just needed to love more. Like that's the solution. If you feel people are being compassionate to you, be more compassionate to other people, and then compassion shows up. But same with love. And once you learn to do that, you don't feel, that people aren't loving to you. You just focus on giving love to other people, and it comes back. It's just the law of nature. I get so wrapped up in myself and my own, selfness. And that is what, drove so much of that pain. But once you learn, like, if I don't feel loved, I need to love more. Like, that's the solution. It isn't for more people to love me. It's for me to love other people more.
Yes.
I'm taking notes. It's good stuff. I mean, I'm still learning and growing too.
I know. Yeah, that's the thing. We all are.
Yeah. And we're all on the path, shoulder to shoulder. I mean, we may be lived experience experts and we go around the world sharing a message, but we're still in this life, and we're still experiencing curveballs of life and everything that everyone else is experiencing, and this environment, this culture, all the issues. And so it is everyday work. It's everyday work throughout the day. And an important thing to remember also is that it's a choice. It is a choice. When you see something, when somebody says something or does something that hurts your feelings, remember, you are not a victim of them. You have a choice in how you thoughtfully respond. And so remember hope, remember compassion, remember love. And even if you snap back and react and you lose it this time, there is always hope that you can, strengthen your self-control and regulation. These are skills. These are skills that we learn and that we practice and that we grow. I mean, I think that that's really the most hopeful thing that, we're saying today, is that even when you don't have them, you can get them, and it's not hard. It just takes a little bit of effort.
Yeah. And I'm super excited. So we all, Scarlett runs the Choose Love movement. Pato Banton has a music, what can I say, following that's amazing. He's an incredible musician all over the world. He's got, I've been listening to his stuff. It is just so fun, and you cannot help
great words, and those words resonate throughout your body. I was just having a conversation with somebody the other day. We were listening to some words of songs, and I was thinking, I don't want this stuff going into my mind, but Pato's work is just resonating deeply through you, and it's all good stuff, and it's just so consistent. It makes you feel good, and it changes you.
Yeah. And teaching how to be compassionate through music, through the language in the music. So fun. And I run the Shine Hope Company, and I have a nonprofit called iFred. And yeah, we're going to start our own YouTube channel about love, hope, and compassion. And we're going to be doing like live streams. We don't know when. We're going to kind of figure it out. But, you know, we work with people on love, hope, and compassion around the world, and we kind of study it in our own ways. And we want to share what we're learning, because our goal is to spread this work and to create a more loving, a more hopeful, a more compassionate world. So yeah, we'll be excited to share more of that as it all develops.
Do we need to enable comments next time? Because I haven't seen any comments.
I don't think we have it. Yes, I think we don't have any comments. So I'm not sure if it's just not set up right, but we've enabled comments. We just don't have any. Yeah.
But I just want to say thank you, ladies, for, you know, initiating this conversation. I've really, really enjoyed it today. Me too.
Me too. And we're going to put this on our new channel. We'll post it. And yeah, we have a website, and we have love, hope, and compassion scores that you'll be able to measure your own love, hope, and compassion. And yeah, I do have one last question. Yes. For Scarlett. Because as you know, Scarlett, 2 of my boys got shot in a drive-by shooting when they were young, but thank God they survived. Yeah. Now, I remember the feeling when I got the phone call that 2 of my boys were shot, and I didn't know if they would survive, but the feeling was so overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to ask you, even though it's inspired you to promote love, how did you get over the hopelessness? What made you work through that initial realization that your son has been taken away from you? Yeah, forever. Well, Earth, during this lifetime. During this lifetime, yeah, by someone who had no consideration for his life. How did you manage to overcome that and get to this point where you're giving other people hope? Well, I took a step back, and I got very thoughtful, and I really, it's interesting, felt compassion for the young man that had taken my son's life, because I understood that he was hopeless. He lacked the hope necessary for him to think that his life could be any better, and out of just utter and complete despair, because could you imagine somebody that would do something so heinous? The only alternative he could think was to try to off-put his tremendous pain onto as many soft targets as he could. And I couldn't muster hatred for him. He had gone to the same school, Pato. He had gone in the same classrooms, the same first grade classroom. I started learning about his life, how he was, and what we've talked about, neglected. He had needs that were known that weren't met. His mom struggled, and therefore he struggled, and there really wasn't a community for either of them. And so along with, you know, Jesse's direction of that nurturing, healing, love message, I thought, wow, I want to honor Jesse's life going forward, but I also want to do everything that I can for those kids that are out there now, not just kids, but adults too, that are feeling such despair because they have not had their needs met. I want to start in schools to teach a formula that can help them with resilience, so that anything that happens in life, they understand is an opportunity for growth, and that they can learn and be strengthened by it. And so, you know, similar to Kathryn and what she's doing as well, helping kids, also adults, with these skills and tools, being proactive and
preventative. So addressing kind of the grievance end of that pathway towards violence and substance abuse and mental illness, why not give the skills and tools that can prevent the suffering that leads to all of that? And so, you know, and I am walking my walk, because the alternative is a life of despair and anger and revenge. And you know, I also had a 12-year-old son that I was modeling for, and how did I want him to move forward? That was a consideration too. So all of these things and everything that I teach, I live. And I know that Kathryn does that as well. And Pato, I know that through everything that you've been through, that you live your message as well. You sing your message.
Literally.
Yeah.
Scarlett, I wonder too, I mean, can you speak to, I mean, when we go through serious traumas, it's important that we get support and that we're not ashamed of that. But the despair, I mean, hopelessness is both emotional despair and a sense of helplessness. And, you know, like the helplessness part, you couldn't bring your son back. And so you did what was in your power to change things for future. So that's how you kind of, to me, manage the helplessness component of hopelessness. So that you weren't stuck in that cycle. But in the sadness, the anger, the fear, you did a lot of things that I think are really helpful for people to learn about. It's not bypassing, you know, you didn't just go out and start a movement and say, hey, everyone, you know, you did a lot of work on self and the trauma related to that. And you studied everything, you learned everything, you tried different things, you know. Can you speak at all to that?
Yeah, I can. You know, first of all, I have a fantastic family, and they nurtured me and helped heal me, and there was a lot of connection there. And so, but yes, I mean, I've always gotten therapy and help, but having such a public tragedy, people came from all over the world to offer trauma treatments, things that you've never even heard of. And I tried everything thinking that, you know, it's not going to hurt me and it might help me. I was searching for things that would help a 12-year-old boy. And I found some incredible things that I would love to share. One is called the Muscatova method. Now, you guys can write this down and then you can go do research on it. But it's called MNRI. Sorry, it's an acronym and I'm not exactly sure what that stands for. But we had that. I still have that treatment. This is 13 years later, so it's an ongoing thing. Healing is a lifetime. But that was laying on a table and working with your body's reflexes. Obviously, when you're in a tremendous amount of fear and trauma, your body goes inside like this. And so it was working on that reflex that told your body, without having to speak or relive the event, you're safe. And that was amazing. The other thing and I was very blessed, because the tapping solution, emotional freedom technique, is located in Newtown. And so Nick Ortner himself came over to my house and tapped with my father and my son and myself. And I had a major breakthrough. And this was, you know, weeks after the tragedy. I was able to take apart and look at anger, not necessarily at Adam, but at other things, and maybe even my use of anger to mask the mourning and the grieving, and that was a major breakthrough. I've met the founders of Havening. Havening is an incredible tool that works with self-soothing movements, things that you might do anyway if you're highly stressed. And these movements, it turns out, after decades of research, directly correlate to your amygdala, and it calms it down. And we know that when you calm down the fear center, you have access to this thing called the prefrontal cortex, where the brake on your instinctual reactions is, where logic and reasoning reside, where your highest and best self is, where when something traumatic happens, you really want to be thoughtfully responding from here instead of just reacting. And so those are just a few of the incredible things that I've done. But I I've had coaching, I have therapy. I've had therapy my entire life, and that is such a blessing. And so, yes, looking externally, Kathryn, is so important, and keeping your mind and heart open, and just knowing that if something that you try or doesn't work, or someone doesn't necessarily have the skills and tools or personality that align with you, you will find somebody out there. You'll find, I have my little group of stuff that I do. I've tried everything, but I've narrowed it down to just a few techniques that really work for me, and they may not work for you, but there's so much out there, especially now.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's so helpful. And I think that's so important too. Different things work for different people. So it's, not getting stuck on one specific thing and saying nothing works. And it's about proactively. I mean, I'm so proactive about managing my despair, managing my helplessness every day, all the time, because we're experiencing those moments way more than we even realize them. You become late for a meeting, and you might feel that fear and then helpless because you can't get that. That's a moment. And, what do you do to navigate that moment? We're either doing it in healthy ways or unhealthy ways. And it's about just kind of making that conscious.
Yeah, so important. The other thing, that I've done is neurofeedback. And, and I encourage everyone, if you have a diagnosis, if you've gone through trauma, if you have ADHD, all of these things, if there's an aggression issue with any of your kids, you go in and you get what's called a QEEG, and they can literally now, and this has been for decades available. Now it's covered by most insurances. You can go in and you can actually, you can validate the diagnosis or invalidate it. I have podcasts called Choosing Love for Authentic Power, where I have interviewed several people that actually provide this service, because I think that everyone should have their diagnoses validated, because some of them you are put on significant medication with terrible side effects. And a lot of the people walking through their door, both of these people told me, had incorrect diagnoses and therefore were on incorrect pharmaceuticals. And it is so important. I mean, now we can see the organ, which is the brain. You would never, walk into a doctor's office and say, oh, my arm hurts. And they would never say, well, let's try to cast it, without looking at it, feeling it, touching an x-ray. Well, now we can do that with the brain. We actually can monitor the brain's energy output, each section of it. And I just, I can't say enough of it. There are many advances in mental health that are happening now really fast because of AI, but all of these things are available. And actually they have been for decades, that I've been talking about. And it's just amazing to me how slow the information goes out. And it's only because I was proactive and looking for information. I didn't want to say that, Pato. Yeah. That I found it. But they're out there, you guys. They're out there. You can get help, and it's incredible what's out there. Go to Kathryn's website. Go to my website. Check out Pato's website. Go to our joint website. We're going to be front loading it with resources. They're not there yet. You can go to our individual websites, but look, you've got Google, you've got AI. I think Tony Robbins, in his latest book, what was it called? I can't remember what his latest book is, but he said a medical doctor's degree is not up to date, like 87 days after you graduate, because of the forward movement of AI. And the only point he was saying is, doctors are incredible. Go see a doctor for sure. They know more about whatever piece that they choose to practice than anybody else. But at the same time, be curious and be your own doctor, and actually use, online, use Google, use AI to make sure that what they're saying is accurate. How can you expect somebody to stay up to date with things that are changing so quickly? That's the point.
Yeah.
So
and use, but like good sources. I mean, AI, be careful with AI, because AI isn't, AI knows stuff, but it says a lot of things that aren't necessarily true. And I've had a lot of experiences with that. So, use accredited sources. Also know your belief about whatever it is one of the most powerful things. So your belief about your own power to heal, your own ability to heal. The nocebo effect is a real thing. If you think, you're going to have a negative side effect, you're over 50% more likely to have a negative side effect by belief alone.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yes, the placebo effect is the positive thing, but the nocebo effect, they did a study and you're going to have a headache, a stomach ache. 50% of the people taking sugar pills reported these negative side effects. So wow. really, our belief matters, our belief in our power and our ability. I'm a big meditator. Meditating changed my life. I didn't want to do it, but I did it for 6 months, 2 hours a day, and it literally changed. It's the first time I realized, I don't have to react to every single thing that happens, even like an itch on my body. I can just observe it and wow, breath work, all the things. So yeah, check us out. And we'll be coming back, sharing more of what we know and what we learn and what we learn from kids. And then, of course, we know now, thanks to research, that music is one of the most powerful healers. It produces all kinds of, we get our dose of, our dopamine or serotonin, and endorphins. They have such a great ability to just, get into that stress response and transform our mood state. And sometimes that's all it takes is putting on a song or dancing or, doing these things that are healthy for us, as opposed to these unhealthy things that, when I was growing up, I did so much of the unhealthy stuff. So we'll be sharing much more as we move through this journey of love, hope, and compassion together.
Awesome.
I know we went on so long, but I love talking to you all so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Yeah, thank you for all you listeners. Namaste. Love you.